The name of Rosa Parks is known to every American schoolboy. During her lifetime, she became a national hero and symbol of the struggle for civil rights of the black population of the United States. Stubbornly following the principles of nonviolent resistance to the racial backgrounds of the American South, she defeated them with one single act that changed America forever and provoked a wave of such force that there was no way back. A year after her quiet riot, racial segregation was abolished, first in the South and then throughout the country. What did this modest woman do who was widely considered too soft to work in politics? It was seen that there was nothing. She refused to give up her place on the bus to a white passenger. This cost her work and security, but gave her much more: the famous dream of all-black America and racial equality, which became a reality. Rosa Louise Parks was born on February 4, 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama, in the family of Leona and James Macaulay. Her mother was a school teacher and wanted the same fate for her daughter, and her father worked as a carpenter. Her parents had African American, Irish, Scottish, and Native American roots. 2 years after Rosa's birth, her brother Sylvester was born, and 2 years later the parents divorced, and the children and their mother moved to Pine Level Farm near Montgomery in Alabama, where Leona's parents lived. Most of the time, the brother and sister were in the care of their grandparents, since Mum spent the whole week at work in the city and returned only on weekends. Little Rosa was not in good health and was often ill, being in bed for a long time. It made her observant, and the atmosphere of the Old South had to be observed, and this was not the most joyful thing for a black child. Already an adult, Rosa Parks recalled how the fires of the Ku Klux Klan blazed around their farm, how they lynched and beat black neighbors. The windows in their house were covered with boards, and her grandfather, who remembered the times of slavery, always kept a gun ready to shoot away from aggressive people in white hoods if necessary. The way of life was agrarian, and until recently, slave-owning southern states was noticeably different from the progressive northern foundations. Although the Civil War ended with the defeat of the Southerners and the formal abolition of slavery, in the South no one was going to give yesterday's slaves equal rights with their former masters. In the 1880s, the southern states adopted the so-called Jim Crow laws, which formally legalized racial segregation in most areas of society. Interracial marriages and any friendly relations between African Americans and whites were banned. Black residents had to use separate libraries, sit on specially marked places in buses, drink from individual fountains on the street, use toilets for colored, and much more. Everyone in whose veins at least 1/32nd part of the Negro blood flowed was recognized as colored. Formally, local authorities declared the slogan, "Divided but equal." In fact, this, of course, had nothing to do with equality. Until the age of 11, Rosa attended a rural school, and while white students went to study on a school bus, then black students had to go to classes on foot. After graduating from elementary school, the future human rights activist entered the Industrial School for Girls, where she studied crafts and the law of God. It was there that Rosa learned to sew well, and the seamstress profession fed her for many years. After the 8th grade, Rosa, following the desire of her mother, entered the College of Education for Blacks, but at the age of 16, she was forced to quit school. Her grandmother became seriously ill, and then her mother. Rosa needed a home to care for them and financially support her family. At this time, she earned doing sewing and worked as a servant in wealthy white families. Later, with the support of her husband, Raymond Parks, she will still receive higher education and will enter the rare 7% of the educated black population of Montgomery. Rosa Parks married on December 18, 1932. She was 19 years old, and he was 10 years older. For both, marriage turned out to be the only and a happy one, despite the absence of children. All their lives together, they supported each other and engaged in human rights work together. In fact, it was the husband who joined Rosa in the struggle for the civil rights of blacks. Raymond worked as a hairdresser and in his spare time was engaged in human rights work at the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. He was the first real activist I ever met, and there was nothing in it from the meek attitude to white people that we called Uncle Tom's attitude, Rosa Parks wrote in her memoirs. After the end of World War II, Rosa began to play a prominent role in the human rights movement of the city of Montgomery. Perhaps the impression of injustice towards her younger brother Sylvester, who played a major role in it, had an effect on her. Along with the white Southerners, he fought and risked his life in the war, and returning home, not only did he not receive the required veteran privileges, but he could not even find work. As a result, Sylvester and his family moved to industrial Detroit, which had a reputation as a city more loyal to people of color and also that needed manpower. NAACP Chief Edward Nixon appointed Rosa Parks to the organization's unpaid secretary position. Rosa was the only woman, and secretarial work was considered female. Then I was too timid to refuse, told Rosa many years later. Her main responsibility in this position was to record various cases of violence and harassment of blacks by the white population of the city. And in Montgomery, with its tense interracial atmosphere, it happened everywhere almost every day. For example, Rosa Parks participated in the fate of 24-year-old African-American Tracy Taylor, raped by 6 white men. Despite the hype surrounding this case, and the fact that Rosa and like-minded people organized the Committee for Equal Justice for Mrs. Recy Taylor, it was not possible to punish rapists by law. They insisted that everything was consensual, and Taylor herself was engaged in prostitution. The court took the side of the accused. For the girl's safety, Rosa Parks and Edward Nixon helped her organize a move to another city. Another project of Rosa as secretary of the NAACP in Montgomery was the struggle for equal voting rights. The city's population was 37% African American, and the share of black voters was only 4%. In theory, black citizens had the right to vote, but in practice, when trying to register as voters, they met a lot of bureaucratic obstacles. Rosa Parks' mother was able to become a voter only after 2 refusals. Rosa herself also did not succeed immediately. And her husband Raymond did not manage to become a voter in Montgomery at all. He received this status a few years later after the family moved to Detroit. Most of the cases that Rosa Parks recorded as NAACP secretary were not investigated, and if it was investigated, then the criminals remained at large. However, this did not prevent Rosa from stubbornly doing her job. She did what she could, including fighting segregation with a personal example. For example, Rosa did not drink water from street fountains divided by race on principle. Despite active work in the NAACP and helping hundreds of African Americans, Rosa Parks remained an unknown seamstress to the general public for many years. In her spare time, working to protect the rights of the city's black population. This was facilitated by her modesty and calm character. However, everything changed literally in one day, more precisely in one evening. Around 6 o'clock on the evening of December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was going back from work, sitting on a bus in seats in the colored section. The bus was gradually filled with people, and there were no free seats in the section for white passengers. Some of them had to stand in the aisle. According to the laws of Alabama at that time, in this case, the driver had the right to demand that black passengers give way by moving the sign "For whites, a row back." The bus driver, a white man named James Blake, did just that. 3 people sitting in the same row with Rosa vacated their seats. Rosa refused to do this. "I don't think I should get up," she said. In response, the driver called the police, and Rosa was taken to the police station. The court fined her $10 for disturbing public order and ordered another $4 to be paid as legal costs. Subsequently, this case would be riddled with speculation from newspaper writers. Rosa's act could be explained either by fatigue after work or by its venerable age. Rosa will refute everything and tell about the true reasons herself. "They said that I did not give up the place because I was too tired. This is not true. I was tired just as usual. I was not old either. I was 42 years old. Although yes, I am tired, but only from one thing, to constantly give up." There was another reason that may have added fuel to the fire of Rosa's determination. The fact is that 12 years ago, she already had a conflict with this driver. Then, Rosa went into the bus through the front door, and when she paid for the fare, James Blake demanded that she go out and come in through the black door designed for colored. Then, Rosa gave in. Now, she could not. Later, James Blake, recalling the 1955 incident, said that he simply followed the instructions given by law. After the story with Rosa, he worked as the driver of this bus for another 19 years. In the sake of fairness, it is worth it to say that there have been cases of disobedience of black passengers to the demands of drivers in Montgomery before. But it was the act of Rosa Parks that caused the effect of the bomb that exploded. It's there for a reason. She was an ideal candidate for the image of a national hero. For example, a few months before the case with Rosa, 15-year-old Claudette Colvin refused to give way to a white passenger on the bus. However, Claudette categorically did not fit the role of a black rights activist. She was underage, pregnant, and unmarried, while Rosa Parks had everything necessary: years of social work, impeccable reputation, higher education, social consciousness, calm character, and moral stability. In addition, the NAACP was behind Rosa with its human resources and advertising capabilities. Ill tongues even said that the incident on the bus was directed by the NAACP, but there is no confirmation of this. Most likely, the NAACP simply took the opportunity, realizing that this story could become a springboard for big changes, and that's what happened. Rosa herself will later say, "When I refused to give a place on the bus, I had no idea that this act would help put an end to segregation laws in the South." When Rosa was fined for disturbing public order, her head at the NAACP, Edward Nixon, with the consent of Rosa, her husband and mother, began to take steps to draw attention to this story. At first, he helped draw up an appeal against the court decision, which Rosa filed on her behalf. And then he got in touch with the young Baptist preacher Martin Luther King. At that time, King was only 26 years old, but he had already established himself as an energetic civil rights activist for African American Southerners, a brilliant organizer and respected leader of the segregation resistance movement. After consulting, Nixon and King decided to draw attention to the story of Rosa Parks with the help of a boycott of Montgomery public transport by the colored population. In a local newspaper for blacks, Montgomery Advertiser published a call to boycott public transport. NAACP volunteers distributed 35,000 leaflets of similar content. The next day, a boycott started. The boycott significantly hit the city's economy. The fact is that about 75% of Montgomery's public transport passengers were colored. The city suffered huge losses. Holding a boycott was also not easy. People had to go to work on foot. Black taxi drivers helped by bringing city residents to work for a symbolic 10 cents. However, sometime later, authorities began to throw a monkey wrench into their plans, manipulating the procedure with licenses for taxi work. Nixon and King's houses were blown up. Rosa Parks was fired from the atelier, and her husband Raymond was forced to quit the hairdresser. The Parks family was left without a single source of income. They began to receive threats of reprisal. However, they foresaw all these risks and deliberately took them. The boycott lasted 13 months and ended only in December 1956, after receiving the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court of November 13, 1956, that segregation in the provision of public transport services violates the U.S. Constitution. It was a victory that made Rosa Parks a celebrity and a national hero. The case of the bus was a turning point, not only in the history of the United States and the biography of Rosa Parks, but also in the personal career of Martin Luther King. After the boycott, the whole country learned about him, and a few years later, he became a national leader of the segregation resistance movement, who led the famous marches to Washington, and where gave his legendary speech, "I have a dream."
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
The consequence was the long-awaited Civil Rights Act of 1964, which permanently established full racial equality in the United States. In the wake of this victory, Martin Luther King received the Nobel Peace Prize, and a few years later, in 1968, he was shot dead in Memphis by white repeat offender James Ray. Despite the fact that Rosa Parks became a cult figure in America after 1955, her daily life required swift decisions. In Montgomery, none of the Parks spouses could find work. They regularly received threats, and in 1957 they moved to Detroit, where the family of Rosa's younger brother Sylvester had already settled. In Detroit, the Parks also did not immediately find work, and for a long time lived very poor. However, over time her life improved. It was in Detroit that Rosa received her first paid job as an activist. In 1965, Democratic Congressman John Conyers appointed Rosa as his secretary and assistant. In this position, she worked for 23 years until her retirement in 1988. Rosa lived the rest of her life in Detroit, continuing to conduct human rights work. It turned out that there was no less racism in this city than in Montgomery. One of the wards of Rosa Parks was a black prisoner, Joan Little, who was accused of killing a white jailer while serving a sentence. According to Little herself, the jailer tried to rape her and she acted within the necessary self-defense. The case caused a powerful resonance among black activists, feminists, and defenders of the rights of prisoners. In 1975, Joan Little was acquitted by a jury, which set an unparalleled precedent in the United States. In the late 1970s, Rosa Parks experienced several losses. First, in April 1977, her husband Raymond died of cancer. In November of that year, Sylvester's brother was gone, and in 1979, her mother Leona died, whom Rosa cared for in recent years. At the same time, Rosa's health remained strong, and she was full of energy. She published several books of memoirs, and she continued to work as an assistant to John Conyers. Her duties in this position became mainly representative. She attended the opening ceremonies of numerous schools and hospitals on her behalf, as well as charity events. In 1994, an incident occurred with 81-year-old Rosa Parks, which the newspapers called evil irony. In her own home, an elderly human rights activist was beaten and robbed by an African-American robber, Joseph Skipper. He demanded money. Rosa refused to give it. Then he beat her, took $104 and disappeared. Rosa Parks was taken to the hospital. She herself reacted philosophically to the situation. We have achieved a lot, but as you can see, we still have a long way to go. The robber had to be transferred away to a prison in another state out of harm's way. In Detroit, the offender of Rosa Parks would have a hard time living. In 1996, President Bill Clinton awarded Rosa Parks the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the United States.
Rosa Parks, thank you and God bless you.
The last appearance of Rosa Parks in public was her attendance at the President's annual address. Today, Rosa Parks sits next to the First Lady of the United States. She can get up or not, whatever she wants, said Clinton. In the last years of her life, Rosa Parks suffered from progressive dementia. She died on October 24, 2005, at the age of 92. The wake took place in the rotunda of the US Capitol. The stream of people wishing to say goodbye to this modest but brave woman did not dry up for 2 days. More than 5,000 people came to the funeral. Rosa became the first woman and the second African American whose wake took place in the Capitol rotunda. Undoubtedly, Rosa Parks was not the only black civil rights activist in the United States. Of course, she was not the first to refuse to obey segregation laws and give up a place to a white passenger on the bus. Nevertheless, it was her act that became the last straw that finally sharpened the stone of racial discrimination in the United States and gave the USA the long-awaited